Half price. Richard Tudor is an expert in a cutting-edge area, the application of DNA profiling and forensic science. With the human genome now fully mapped, he uses this knowledge to investigate historical mysteries. His job involves extracting and studying DNA from individuals who lived long ago, working in locations ranging from mass burial sites to private graveyards, always with the necessary permissions. He's deeply involved in the study of how unique DNA traits can link to susceptibility to certain viruses. The theory is clear: if you possess a specific genetic vulnerability, it's likely nobody alive today shares that exact weakness. Viruses, known for their persistence, can hunt down these genetic susceptibilities over centuries. While dormant at times, they never truly disappear. Some carriers of a virus remain unaffected but can still transmit it. Epidemics arise when a virus swiftly infects several people with the same vulnerability. This concept extends to family genetics. If one family member is infected, the chances of another family member getting infected are high due to shared genetic risks. Richard's research aims to identify specific DNA patterns in those most affected by emerging viruses, facilitating targeted vaccine distribution. Setting aside his professional life, Richard has been contemplating a different application of DNA analysis, detecting potential infidelity. He muses over the idea of predicting the likelihood of unfaithfulness in a relationship through genetic markers. Why has this been on his mind, you might ask? It stems from his own experiences. Richard's marriage to Charlotte was a turbulent journey that included a decline in intimacy and eventual betrayal. He believes Charlotte engaged in extramarital activities, which ultimately led to their divorce. Since then, for about 6 months, Richard hadn't been involved with anyone else, adhering to the exclusivity they once promised each other. Dealing with the aftermath of his marriage, Richard felt oblivious, a feeling he thinks many spouses share. There's an inherent trust that both partners are equally committed, so when betrayal happens, it's a shock. Richard's story is not just about his work but also about his journey through personal challenges and the quest for understanding in relationships. 9 months earlier, Richard and Charlotte were contemplating the purchase of their first home, a significant step that involved applying for a mortgage. They learned that their interest rate would depend on their individual credit scores and were advised to rectify any inaccuracies in their credit reports before proceeding. Using the lending company's online tools, Richard started by checking their credit scores on Experian. His was 680, and he knew that improving it slightly could lead to significant savings on their mortgage. Charlotte's score, however, was 620, prompting Richard to investigate the reasons behind it. Richard found an unfamiliar charge on his report and disputed it. As for Charlotte's credit history, there was only one negative item, which didn't seem sufficient to explain her lower score. After some effort and conversations with customer service, Richard deduced that Charlotte might have more credit cards than he was aware. This was puzzling, as he believed they shared the same financial habits. Digging deeper, he discovered that Charlotte had an additional credit card, which she was paying off monthly. The expenditures were consistent but had gone unnoticed by Richard until now. Driven by a need to understand these charges, Richard extended his investigation late into the night. Eventually, he accessed Charlotte's credit card account and found that the charges were linked to a motel on the outskirts of town, with regular visits every Tuesday. This discovery left Richard feeling betrayed and led him to devise a plan to uncover more details. He bought a disposable phone for his investigation, though he felt he already had enough evidence of Charlotte's betrayal. His plan involved visiting the motel under a pseudonym. Upon arrival at the motel, Richard was informed of ongoing renovations and offered a temporary trailer room, which he accepted, noting that they wouldn't need it for long. The situation at the motel and his discovery of the regular visits fueled Richard's suspicion and deepened his sense of betrayal. "All right, your trailer is the one without a number, just about 20 yards beyond number 15. You can't miss it, the numbers are clear on the top left corner. Enjoy your stay," said the clerk with a knowing wink as he handed the key to Bart, who grinned broadly in response. There was a shared understanding between them. Once outside, Bart beckoned Charlotte over, suggesting they walk to the trailer. "Here, you should have your credit card back," he said, handing it to her. Together, they walked past a neatly arranged row of trailers, with their destination being the last one, standing out from the rest. After entering, they quickly drew the curtains for privacy. "I'll just put my phone on silent," Bart said, only to notice, "That's odd, I've got no signal." Charlotte echoed his sentiment, finding herself without service as well. Disregarding the minor inconvenience, they focused on each other. Bart began to undress, and Charlotte followed suit, engaging in a playful dance. They drew closer, exploring each other with growing intensity. In their passionate embrace, they lost track of time and their surroundings. As they were completely absorbed in each other, they failed to notice the peculiar changes outside. The light outside had faded, and the interior was strangely dark. Amid their fervor, they were startled by a sudden movement. The trailer began to move, causing them to pause. "What's happening?" Bart exclaimed, halting in confusion. Charlotte, caught up in the moment, urged him not to stop, despite the unusual circumstances. They felt the trailer turn and tilt, adding to their disorientation. When Bart pulled back the curtain to peer outside, it was pitch black, leaving them in a mix of surprise and bewilderment, far removed from the mundane reality they had temporarily escaped. Bart's alarmed voice startled Charlotte as he exclaimed, "The lights aren't working. Try opening the door." "It's jammed," he replied in frustration. As the trailer took another turn, Bart nearly lost his footing. "This is a trap," he yelled. "What do you mean?" Charlotte asked, her voice laced with anxiety. "Someone knew we'd be here today. This isn't a coincidence. The clerk was part of it," Bart realized. "Oh no, Richard must know about us. He's orchestrating this," Charlotte feared. The trailer continued to sway unpredictably. Suddenly, a voice came through a speaker, shocking them. "Good afternoon, Charlotte, and hello to you too. You two seemed quite occupied when your unexpected journey began," the voice taunted. "Richard, is that you? What are you doing?" Charlotte asked, her voice trembling. "I'm comfortably at my desk, controlling this situation." "And you, Charlotte?" Having second thoughts. Richard's voice was cold and calculating. Charlotte's response was filled with regret. "What do you plan to do with us?" Richard's reply was chilling. "No one can hear you except me. You're currently on the highway. My original plan involved a dramatic accident and a lake. However, I'm considering leaving you in the desert's heat. It's over 110 degrees outside. Imagine the temperature inside that trailer. I wanted you both to experience some consequences for your actions." He continued, addressing Bart, "I just spoke with your wife. She's off to sell your comic book collection. She's hoping to get $100 for it." Bart groaned in dismay. "That's worth $50,000. Yes, not covered by your prenup. You might want to call her unless you're fine with losing it. And Charlotte, I sold your grandmother's ring and pendant for $50. I'll leave the cash for you in an envelope. I might return to the pawn shop with the rest of your jewelry." The couple was left in shock and despair, realizing the depth of Richard's calculated revenge. "Oh my God, Richard, you can't be serious," Charlotte pleaded. Richard's voice came through the speaker, his tone mocking. "Your mother was quite upset when I told her you pawned her gift to buy, let's just say, a personal product. She was quite naive about these things." Charlotte, sobbing, asked again, "What are you going to do with us, Richard?" "Just sit tight for now. You've got a few hours drive ahead of you. I'll be in touch," Richard's voice replied, leaving them in uncertainty. For the next 3 hours, both Charlotte and Bart alternated between calling out Richard's name and enduring a deafening silence that seemed to amplify their fears. Bart's desperate attempts to find a way out were futile, and his efforts to seek comfort from Charlotte resulted in him getting scratched. When the trailer slowed down, presumably for gas, they saw a chance to call for help. However, their hopes were dashed when a loud, high-pitched noise from the speaker made it impossible for them to scream or attract attention. The reality was grim. They were merely parked on an off-ramp, with the driver refueling from cans. After the trailer started moving again, the silence returned. Charlotte tried a different tactic, attempting to seduce Richard through the speaker, but it was unclear if it had any effect. It was several more hours before Richard spoke again. "Hello again. I've decided on a new plan. Once you reach your destination, you'll have 2 minutes to leave the trailer before I shoot the propane tank. Think about your escape," Richard's voice threatened. Bart, enraged, shouted, "Richard, we can't get out. You know that's murder." Richard's response was chilling. "Premeditated, yes, but finding you would be the real challenge." Charlotte, in desperation, pleaded for mercy, promising to change. But the speaker remained silent, leaving her to wonder if her attempt at persuasion had made things worse. Shortly after their tense exchange, the trailer began to slow down, making a sharp left turn. Charlotte, now keeping her distance from Bart, watched as the faint light seeped in. The atmosphere inside was far from the earlier intimacy. Suddenly, the speaker crackled to life. "Time's up," Richard's voice announced ominously. "It's completely dark outside. You have 2 minutes starting now. Escape while you can, because soon the only light will be from the trailer burning. You'll have to navigate by the stars tonight. And to make things interesting, the driver will place stakes on the roof. When they burn, their scent might attract predators. Best of luck." Panic set in. Bart and Charlotte, now at odds, heard the trailer come to a stop. In desperation, Bart began pounding on the roof vent with his shoe. Outside, unsettling noises surrounded them, howls and growls, possibly from coyotes or wolves, instilling terror. The thought of these creatures possibly breaking in added to their fear. As quickly as it started, the noises stopped. The driver outside had been playing a recording through a boombox and had used rakes to mimic scratching sounds. He then created a loud noise by clapping 2 pieces of wood together and began to simulate smoke by burning cardboard and paper, directing it into the trailer with a fan. The couple inside, thinking they were in imminent danger, began to scream. The driver then released a sleeping gas through another funnel. Within minutes, the screaming and banging from inside the trailer ceased. The driver continued the gas for a little longer to ensure they were unconscious. Charlotte felt groggy, with the warmth of the sun on her skin. Struggling to open her eyes, she realized something was amiss. A quick check confirmed she wasn't wearing anything. Alarmed, she forced her eyes open, only to find herself in her car, under the blazing sun. She glanced around. The temporary trailers were still there, and an envelope with a note for $50 was in the cup holder. Panic set in when she noticed her rings were missing. She was in a motel parking lot, without her clothes, keys, or phone. People nearby were taking photos, seemingly intrigued by her situation. Nearby, she noticed a commotion around another car. Bart, an acquaintance, seemed to be in a similar distressing situation, looking disheveled and injured. Concerned, Charlotte managed to open her car door and asked a bystander for help, but the response was crude and unhelpful. Angered, she threatened to raise an alarm for safety. Soon, the police and an ambulance arrived. Bart was hurt and needed medical attention, while Charlotte found herself in trouble with the law, accused of public indecency. Without any evidence to support her side of the story, she felt helpless. Dressed in clothes from the motel's Lost and Found, Charlotte went through the process of being booked and photographed at the police station. She tried reaching out to Richard, but with no response, she reluctantly called her mother for help. "Hello, Mom, it's Charlotte." "Charlotte who?" "Mom, please, let's not do this now. Why should I care? You think I should be proud of how you've ended up." Charlotte felt a wave of sadness, her tears uncontrollable. "Mom, I'm in trouble. I have no keys, no money, and nowhere to go. Please help me. You didn't earn anything for your actions." "Mom, I made mistakes, but I'm not what you think. Richard isn't answering his calls, and I need you. Maybe a few nights on your own won't hurt. You need to think about your actions." Charlotte was shocked. Her mother had never spoken so harshly before. "Please, Mom, I need you." "Where are you?" "At Precinct 5 station, near Broadway and Flint." "All right, I'll be there, but it'll take about 8 hours." "But Mom, it's already noon. What should I do until then?" "I'm not sure what to suggest." "You can wait for 8 hours, that's your only option." Trying to hold back her tears, Charlotte responded, "Okay, I'll wait. Please hurry." After being released, Charlotte left the precinct, feeling uncomfortable in her mismatched clothes and struggling to hold back her emotions. She had a lot of time to reflect on her situation. Gratefully, she could use the restroom at the station, rushing to avoid missing her mother. Around 5 p.m., adding insult to injury, Richard drove past her, honking and ignoring her attempts to approach. He quickly drove away. Her mother arrived later, not in her usual car but in her father's truck. Charlotte was directed to ride in the back, feeling utterly defeated. The night was cold, and the ride was uncomfortable. Arriving at her house, Charlotte realized she couldn't get in. Her mother refused to take her to her place and left after a brief and unsettling interaction. Finding all doors locked and no spare key, Charlotte, shivering in the cold, decided to seek help from a friend. Linda, her neighbor, welcomed her warmly. Charlotte, not revealing the full story, stayed with Linda, hoping Richard would come back soon. Charlotte woke up to the morning sun in Linda's front room. Using Linda's phone, she called Richard, hoping for some understanding. "Good morning, Linda," Richard answered cheerfully. "It's not Linda, it's me, Charlotte. I can't get into our house. Why should that concern me?" "Richard, haven't you done enough? I'm just asking to get my things." "Your stuff is at your parents' house," Richard falsely claimed. Charlotte's voice broke. "Can we talk, please?" "Talking won't change what's happened. I'm busy today. Say hi to Linda for me." The call ended abruptly, leaving Charlotte distraught. She tried calling her mother, only to find out Richard hadn't been truthful about her belongings. Returning to her house, she found the front door open. Most of her items were still there, except her grandmother's ring and pendant. Distressed, she tried to cleanse herself, feeling unclean and overwhelmed. After drying her hair, Charlotte was heading to the kitchen when the doorbell rang. A couple was waiting outside. "Mrs. Charlotte Tudor." "Yes, that's me. What is it?" The woman handed her an envelope while the man recorded the interaction. "You have been served. Have a nice day." Charlotte steadied herself against the doorframe, feeling her knees weaken. She sat down to read the document, a straightforward asset division, with a clause about her accusations against Richard. Realizing her lack of resources, no car, phone, or cash, and without her ID, she couldn't even cash a check at the grocery store. Her walk back home was filled with tears and frustration. Upon spotting Richard's car in the driveway, Charlotte hurried home. She found her keys and purse left in a fast food bag on the porch. Inside, Richard was sitting at the kitchen table with a man named Mark Wilson. "Richard, please reconsider the divorce. I've made mistakes, but I want to work things out and stay in our house," Charlotte pleaded. "I'm not interested in what you want. Mark here is a witness for the divorce papers." "I'll be moving out soon," Richard said, pushing the papers towards her. "Can't we discuss this?" "I won't bring up any past issues," Charlotte tried. Mark interjected, "Are you insinuating Richard did something wrong? That's a serious accusation." Richard looked at her with a smirk. Charlotte, feeling defeated, agreed to sign the papers. After signing, Mark took the papers and left. Richard went to the bedroom, leaving Charlotte alone and upset. When he returned, she asked about her grandmother's ring and pendant. "I gave them to your mother. She felt you didn't deserve them," he replied. "Can you at least explain how everything happened?" "I don't know what you mean," Richard said with a grin. "Fine, you win," Charlotte acknowledged, feeling a mix of admiration and disappointment. "And I never really knew you," she added, breaking down in tears again. Bart Travis lived a few houses away from Charlotte. Richard, who had seen Bart at local gatherings, knew of his interest in collectibles. Mrs. Travis was unaware of her husband's affair and had only interacted with Richard at community events. Despite the end of their marriage, Bart managed to keep his cherished comic book collection, thanks to a stringent prenuptial agreement. His injury, unfortunately, was severe and had lasting implications. As for Charlotte, she was convicted of a minor public indecency charge and sentenced to complete 30 hours of community service. My comment: well, that ended well. The only thing I didn't understand was why she would go to the neighbors instead of breaking a window to get into her own house. Story 2. The closure. I know, I said, more calmly than I felt. My wife of 32 years, Melinda, paused mid-change from her work clothes. It was a typical Thursday evening, and lately, she had been coming home much later than usual, despite her workplace being only a 15-minute drive from our home. I know you're seeing someone else, I stated plainly. It's been evident from how infrequently we've been intimate over the past year. Melinda's response was clinical. Our intimacy issues stem from your medical condition. She was referring to the medication I was on, essential for managing my severe blood pressure issues, but it had the unfortunate side effect of affecting my physical performance. I knew the medication was necessary for my health, but it didn't make the side effects any easier to bear. I struggled with feelings of frustration and depression, exacerbated by my inability to be intimate with Melinda the way I used to. Despite my condition, Melinda's behavior felt like a betrayal. You know, there are other ways to be intimate, I said, recalling times when we had found alternative ways to connect physically. Melinda offered a suggestion, trying to bring back a spark of our old intimacy, but I was too hurt to consider it. I accused her of being unfaithful, suspecting her undergarments might reveal the truth. Her reaction was a mix of shock and anger. Are you going through my personal things? She demanded, clearly upset by the invasion of privacy. I retorted, focusing on her infidelity, feeling hurt and helpless in my situation. The conversation escalated, with accusations and harsh words flying between us. Melinda defended herself, explaining her actions as a response to unmet needs, but her words did little to ease my pain. She described her encounters as nothing more than physical releases, trying to differentiate them from our emotional connection. I brought up specific names, revealing my knowledge of her affairs, which surprised her. She confessed to seeing other men, rationalizing it as a substitute for what we couldn't share physically. The conversation turned to the practicalities of our life together, with Melinda pointing out how she still cared for me and attended to my needs despite her actions. But the revelation of her infidelity and the casual way she spoke of it deepened my sense of betrayal. As we continued to argue, Melinda suggested that we should accept this new reality and try to move forward. She proposed that we could still have a meaningful relationship, despite her physical needs being met elsewhere. The discussion ended with Melinda leaving for another encounter, while I was left to grapple with the revelations and my own emotions. The following morning, Melinda attempted to address the situation again, suggesting a compromise where she would be more discreet about her actions. However, I remained hurt and disillusioned by the breakdown of our marriage. Melinda's attitude was unapologetic, and she continued to plan her activities independently. She even suggested quitting her job to spend more time with me, but her proposal seemed hollow in light of her ongoing affairs. The conversation revealed deep rifts in our relationship, with Melinda viewing her actions as a necessary part of her life, while I struggled with feelings of betrayal and loss. It was clear that our marriage had fundamentally changed, leaving me to ponder the future and the steps I needed to take. As Melinda prepared to leave for another evening out, I felt a mix of anger and resignation. Her justification for her actions, treating her encounters as mere physical outlets, did little to soothe the wound. She seemed to believe that acknowledging them as nothing more than toys would somehow lessen the betrayal. I remained silent, my thoughts a whirlwind of emotions and plans. Melinda, mistaking my silence for acceptance, left with a light step, suggesting that perhaps she might quit her job to spend more time with me, a gesture that felt empty given the context. After she left, I reflected on the drastic changes in our marriage. The intimacy we once shared seemed like a distant memory, replaced by a stark, painful reality. My business, which I had built before our marriage, suddenly appeared to be the only thing wholly mine. I contemplated the legal and financial implications of our situation. Melinda was entitled to a portion of our assets, but I had already taken steps to ensure my children would inherit my share. The thought of divorce crossed my mind, a way to protect what I had built and distance myself from the betrayal. Later that day, Melinda returned, still immersed in her world. She was frustrated with her plans not going as expected, seemingly more concerned about her rendezvous than the state of our marriage. I know, I said, more calmly than I actually felt. My wife of 32 years, Melinda, paused mid-change from her work attire. You know what? Melinda asked, sounding nonchalant as she continued to change. It was a Thursday evening, and she had been arriving home consistently late, despite her workplace being a mere 15-minute drive from our home. I know you're seeing someone else, I accused. It's become evident considering how distant we've been lately. Our distance isn't just physical, she countered. Your health issues have been a barrier. She was referring to my medical condition, which, since starting my medication, had impacted our physical relationship. I knew the medication was crucial for my health, preventing more serious complications, but it didn't make the situation any easier. Those medications are critical for my health, I argued, feeling the weight of our strained relationship. I described my struggle with the side effects of my medications, how they affected my mood and physical capabilities. It was a source of deep frustration for me, affecting not just my health but our relationship too. Despite all this, Melinda's actions felt like a betrayal. There are other ways to maintain a connection, I reminded her, recalling how we used to adapt our intimacy in the past. Melinda sarcastically offered a solution, which I rejected. I accused her of being intimate with someone else, suspecting evidence in her personal items. "You've been going through my things?" she asked, shocked and angry. "That's a huge invasion of privacy." I was incredulous. "You're more concerned about your privacy than the fact that you're betraying our marriage," I shot back. "I'm left to fend for myself while you're out betraying our vows." "Don't call me names," Melinda retorted. "I have my needs, and I've always been upfront about them. I've tried to be there for you in every way I could. Do you have any idea how hard it was to see you in the hospital, to take care of you through your illness? I'm still here, aren't I?" I didn't buy her excuses. "You're coming home late, spending nights out without me. I know it's not just casual outings with friends. You've even offered to help me in ways that make me uncomfortable." Melinda admitted to seeing someone else. "I have my needs, but there's no emotional connection like what we have. Think of it as a mere physical outlet, nothing more." I scoffed at her explanation. "A physical outlet? You're minimizing what you're doing. It's not just about going out and meeting physical needs. It's about respect, about our marriage vows." She tried to justify her actions. "You need to accept the reality. This is just how I cope. It's not about love. It's about fulfilling a need. Accept it. You expect me to just accept that you're out there with other men while our marriage falls apart." I was astounded at her nonchalance. Melinda was unapologetic. "I'll always come home to you. That's what should matter. We can still have a life together." She then announced she had plans for the evening, plans that didn't include me. "Think of it as just a physical thing, nothing more." I was livid, struggling to comprehend how she could be so indifferent. "You really don't see how this is affecting our marriage, do you? You're just going to continue as if nothing's wrong." Melinda left for her evening out, leaving me alone with my thoughts, grappling with the state of our marriage and the stark reality of our situation. Unbelievable. You know how I feel about that kind of language. It's disrespectful and hurtful. I've been trying to consider your feelings. That's why I haven't been open about my activities outside our marriage. You're really pushing my limits here. I want an apology from you." "I've had enough," I retorted sharply. I walked out the front door, with Roscoe, my loyal border collie, following me. At least I had one faithful companion. That night, I couldn't find comfort. I ended up in the guest room, the bed uncomfortable, but preferable to sharing a bed with Melinda under the circumstances. My mind raced with thoughts about what she had said earlier. Early the next morning, I was in the kitchen planning my day, still troubled by our recent conversation. When Melinda entered, I barely acknowledged her as she began to speak. "I'm sorry for the things I said last night. It wasn't fair to you. I didn't realize you'd be sleeping in here." She tried to justify her actions. "I have certain needs, and I've found a way to meet them, but they're not important to me in the way you are. We've had a good life together, and I don't want to lose that. I'll try to keep my personal life from affecting our family. I'm going to make sure our home life remains stable." Her words were an attempt at reconciliation, but they fell flat. "You're not planning to stop, are you?" I asked quietly, feeling a mix of sadness and resignation. Melinda was defensive. "You wouldn't dare expose this situation. It would be too embarrassing for you." "And no, I'm not stopping. But I'll be more discreet. I'll be out late tonight, but tomorrow, let's spend the day together. Maybe we can reconnect a bit." As she prepared to leave for work, she pondered aloud. "Maybe I should quit my job. We don't need the money, and it might be better for us if I'm home more. We could spend time together, just enjoying each other's company. Think about it." Her tone was light, almost hopeful, as she left the house. Melinda was partially right about one thing. Listening to the recording of her conversation did upset me. I had already heard it, skipping over the parts that were too painful to bear. What truly caught my attention was her venting, which only solidified my resolve. In the recording, Melinda spoke harshly. "Ron knows about us and Dan," she said tersely. "He's been spying on us, somehow listening in." Her tone was frustrated. "Ron, if you're listening, this is none of your business." I heard a man, presumably Bob, mutter something in agreement. "No, Ron won't fire you or Dan. He wouldn't want his personal issues to become public knowledge." I checked, but I can't find any bugs. "Maybe we need to get a professional to search for them. He's probably angry about knowing we meet up, but he didn't hear everything." Bob's response was light, trying to make light of the situation. Melinda's anger was evident. "He crossed a line," she said. "He insulted me after I tried to explain that our meetings are just casual. I was so angry, I thought about confronting him directly." "You're really upset with him," Bob acknowledged. Melinda's tone was one of determination. I had to stand my ground. "Ron needs to realize that I'm in control of my own life." Bob seemed to encourage her stance. "That's quite a statement. It's intriguing to think about." I couldn't listen any further. The conversation was too much for me. My thoughts then turned to my business and legal matters. I had taken steps to ensure that my assets were protected and would go to my children. Melinda might have legal rights to some of our property, but I had made decisions about my estate that reflected the current state of our marriage. Later, Melinda returned home, speaking into her phone with frustration. I need to go out tonight. I'm not waiting around for a response. She noticed me sitting quietly. You heard my conversation. It's just a part of my life you need to accept. Melinda changed into a dress and prepared to leave. You seem okay with everything now, she observed. I'm glad you understand that these outings of mine are just for fun. I nodded silently, not wanting to engage further. I then called over Roscoe, who obediently performed tricks I asked of him. Melinda seemed preoccupied, only half paying attention. At least you're doing something. That's good to see. She repeated her earlier point, seeking my agreement. You're accepting the situation, right? It's just a bit of fun for me, nothing serious. I diverted the conversation, showing her something else. Roscoe continued to impress with his training, and I rewarded him with pieces of meat. Melinda finally took notice. Is it okay for him to eat that? She asked, still distracted. I revealed the last piece of meat, implying its connection to her personal items. I've made some changes, I said, alluding to my recent actions. My comment, a messed up couple where they keep trying to trick each other.